Ken James and Jason McKittrick, brought to you by Cryptocurium.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Learning Lovecraft. I'm your host, Jason McKittrick, and joining me as always, the traveler of the Eldritch Path, Mr. Ken James.
Good evening, folks.
And tonight, as always, we are delving into the world of a certain Mr. H.P. Lovecraft. And tonight, we're starting a new episode type segment / thing, right?
Yeah. Segment / thing type.
Yeah. It can't be described.
Much like the unnamed narrator can't
right.
describe the horrors that he has witnessed.
Right. And if you're going off
of a certain writings of an H.P. Lovecraft, you know the guy.
We know the guy. That's why we're here. We you know him, you love him. But you may have noticed from either the episode title or the episode artwork, we're starting a new episode type called Cyclopean Cinema. Now what that is. So as we're going through the stories, and we go through, obviously we're going through chronological order. Once we cover a story, we're going to keep in mind if there is a film adaptation, and if there is, we're going to watch it and give our thoughts. Mostly Ken's thoughts, because I've seen most of these and have read the stories, and this is the journey of Ken.
Mr. Ken James.
Mr. Ken James. So we're starting it off with possibly the most well-known Lovecraft adaptation, and I use that word loosely. We're going to be covering Ken?
Herbert West's Re-Animator / Re-Animator.
Yes.
/ I don't like it.
It is pretty wild in my opinion how different these two these two stories are compared to, you're reading we did the story, you love the story,
love the story.
Yep. And being somebody who's into horror even before you even looked at anything by H.P. Lovecraft, before you even started this podcast, I'm sure you were aware of this film, because most people are.
Yeah, as having an older brother who is an aficionado of B-rated horror movies, and C-rated horror movies. I had thrust upon me my father was the same. It was thrust upon me at a very young age to watch all these movies.
Right.
Which made me the harsh critic that I am today. In so many ways.
I'll show him this isn't any good.
Yeah, I can't. One day I'll be in charge of the remote.
Right. So from the top, I just want to do a little disclaimer. I respect and like Stuart Gordon. I got to have dinner with him back in 2013 at Necronomicon. Very nice guy. He was very affable. We talked about a few things. I mean, there was a lot of people at the dinner, but he actually talked to me for a few minutes and signed a couple things for my friend, which was great. He has since passed, unfortunately, but you got to give it to him, because a lot of people come to H.P. Lovecraft's work through his films. Mm-hmm. They are very much a departure, as we've discussed in the actual Re-Animator episode, but we didn't go into it too deep. He definitely has his style and the way that he likes to inject sexuality and humor into any of the story that he's adapting. But I thought it would be, it would be a good thing to make this the first movie we came across, because it's the big one that everybody goes to and everybody usually quotes. And when you say H.P. Lovecraft, like, you ever see Re-Animator? Oh yeah, that was kind of written by him. The movie, kind of.
Well, yeah. So one thing I do want to say too, before we get too deep into it. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's look at 80s movies, right? Especially horror movies in the 80s, right? So especially mid 80s, you have, it's either horrible B and they have to, it becomes good because it's so bad, or there was some director that just made this movie good or wrote it well, or you had the big budget horror movie that was still a little, it was still a little, but they, it became iconic. So I don't fault him for, the studio not giving him a lot of money to do this or giving him all this stuff. I'm just going off the film itself. I'm not going off of, the merits of the man or what he's maybe accomplished. I'm just going in talking about, now that I'm learning Lovecraft and reading these stories, I'm going back and I watched it again. Maybe I was too harsh on it, when I've watched it the 3 times that I was made to watch it, and then the once by myself to give it a second chance, and then watching again by myself to give it another chance. don't like it. I just don't like it.
Right. Well, we will definitely dive into it. But going forward, we will have these episodes kind of, inserted in between. Yeah, peppered in there. I like that.
Yeah.
There will be obviously straight adaptations. And then as me and Ken were talking about it, there are also movies that are Lovecraftian in tone. So you can be sure we're going to cover The Thing, Alien, In the Mouth of Madness, all those. But we're going to get to the straight adaptations first. So, right. All right, so Re-Animator, released on October 18th of 1985, directed by the aforementioned Stuart Gordon, produced by Brian Usna. You can't forget those two names because they are flashed so many times in the opening titles.
Yeah, came out almost a year before I was born.
Wow, it anticipated your arrival.
It did. I feel like this guy's going to hate it, and I just...
Yep. Music was by Richard Band, and that's another name we're going to come across again if we're watching these.
I liked the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, the opening titles very much pulls from Psycho.
And the opening graphics and everything, the colors, I enjoy that as well.
It's fun. It's got a quirkiness to it, and it kind of gets you in the mood to know that you're going into something that's not going to be
super serious.
Right. And
feeling itself too much.
Right. So we get the opening scene, which Zurich, Switzerland, Institute of Medicine, and we don't get his name yet, but we have our main guy, Dr. Herbert West, and he's working on his dead professor, Dr. Hans Gruber, and trying to bring him back to life with his, as we all know, the glowing reagent. And we get we see the horrific side effects, as West explains, that he says, they say, "Oh, you killed him," and he's like, "No, the doses were too large," and then when he's accused, he looks at the screen and, "I gave him life." And you're just like, okay, I know, I see where we're at.
Yeah, and his eyes explode, and
yeah. Jeffrey Combs is a maniac. I mean,
we've discussed him before.
Yeah, exactly. So we're just going to do a quick little overview of the story. So West arrives at the aforementioned Miskatonic University, which in the film looks like OCP. I was waiting for RoboCop to show up.
Right, and I was also, going back to the actual serum, or the Re-Animated agent. I was like, did he get this from TGRI? Is that what this is?
I mean, there was the potential for RoboCop, Ninja Turtles, all sorts of stuff in this movie. You didn't know where it was going to go.
Yeah. Predator blood.
Right. So he's here in order to, he's here to further his studies as a medical student, we have him renting the room from our main guy, who gets a name here, Dan Kane.
Yeah, Dan Kane. You could tell they were trying to pull like a Lovecraftian name.
Yeah, they're trying. They're like, that sounds kind of tough. All right,
edgy.
It is edgy. And when we're introduced to him, it really starts up like they hit you with that there's going to be quite a bit of sexuality in this movie, because he's pumping the chest of the dead woman in the trying to give her resuscitation, and boobs are just out.
Yeah, just big old lady boobs.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, so this is where we're at. And he's just he just has, you could tell he has that dedication. He can't let go, and the one nurse or the other doctor, she's like, you have to know when to let go.
Yeah, a good doctor knows when.
Right. So obviously, fast forwarding a bit, we have Barbara Crampton, who is legendary in these Lovecraftian adaptations. She's the love interest, but also the daughter of Dean Halsey.
And that's the first thing. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. And
no, it's fine.
The love interest thing is the biggest misstep with this adaptation. Not to be like a ooh, women. No, just the love interest thing.
Yeah,
completely throws it off of what the story, actual story is.
100%. That's why I just want to run through this little synopsis.
Sorry.
No, buddy, all good. This is a little, this is just a little overview of it. So I said, West shows up at Dan's house because he left a note, a little advertisement saying that he was looking for a roommate, and his address is hysterical. It's like 666 Darkmoor Avenue.
Yeah,
or something. It's
666 Scary Edgy Lane.
Yeah, exactly.
Tentacle Lane.
Yeah, exactly. Spooky tentacles.
Yeah.
So he obviously very forward dude. He very creepily inspects the basement, and he's like, "Oh, this will do fine." That's all kind of like thing. And obviously the girlfriend, she's very like, "No, you should be saying." He just pulls out some cash. He's like, "Nope, you'll never even know I'm here except for on the first of the month."
My favorite part there too, though, when she's like, "Maybe you guys should talk a little about it," and he's like, "Well, I've already decided. Like, it's up to him." I was like,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, and I also mentioned that right before that, he shows up at the house in the midst of them having sex. It's like there's already another nudity scene right after.
Yeah, nice boobies, but he's trying to spook her out with like the sheet on him, and then and he's like all nude. He's like, "What's going on?" And he pulls his ween out.
Yeah, it gets wild.
Yeah.
So West, he's going to use this basement as his personal laboratory, right? And going forward a little bit, West go ahead and he demonstrates his reanimating reagent to Dan by reanimating Dan's dead cat. I think his cat's name is Rufus, right? And the scene when this happens, I know we're kind of just glossing over stuff, but the scene when the cat comes to life, he comes downstairs. West is just out of his mind, and you hear the noises and just the scene of them like acting this out, where they're just knocking against stuff. Yeah. Jeffrey Combs is going berserk, chewing the scenery, and when the cat is on his back and he's like flipping out, and then he goes after Dan and it jumps at Dan and he throws it against the wall. Yeah. And the animatronic, if you could even call it that, it's like a sock puppet. Yeah, is so bad. And obviously we're not going to judge that too much, because that's almost like the charm of some of these movies. Well, but
at that point too, they're trying to capture a scene that's later on in the actual story, right? Of them antically trying to fight against this thing together, and you see they're trying to do it, but you're like, missed the mark.
Yep. So after he throws it against the wall and stomps it or whatever, they try to reanimate it again, and that's when Megan, Dan's fiance, comes in, and she sees what's going on, and she's completely horrified.
Yeah.
Freaks out, and
what do you say? It's not going to thank us. Its back is broken.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to love that. There's a version trying to be done here by Jeffrey Combs of they talk about Herbert West in the story being just completely devoid of emotion. He's just removed from it. There's nothing sentimental about life in any way, shape, or form. But then there's there's this dark comedy version that he's trying to portray the whole time, which it works to some degree, but
because even in the story you brought it up that there is a little bit of humor to it when it's not fresh enough, that kind of thing.
Right. So fast forward a little bit more, Dan's in some hot water, and he's trying to explain to Alan, Dr. Halsey, and who's Megan's father, obviously, and the dean of the medical school, and he's trying to tell about West's success in reanimating the dead cat, but he don't believe him. He don't want to hear none of it. Yeah. He already thinks that West is kind of a kook to begin with. Doesn't cooperate in class.
And also Dean, he's real close with
oh yeah,
adversary of Herbert West's mentor and teacher.
Oh yeah, our boy Dr. Carl Hill. We'll get to him.
I
might as well talk about him. He's already showed up a few times. He's kind of the hotshot surgeon over there at the school. He's the guy who's in charge of the things that West wants to be in charge of.
Fabricator of a laser drill.
Right. He's got that really, that gnarly, he's, going through the guy's forehead. And you can tell that, as soon as he gets there, West is doesn't respect the guy, thinks he's ridiculous. But he's in every scene. I mean, there's even a scene when, Dan and Megan are like, "Oh, we're gonna go study," and he's just sitting there leering at the daughter, "Oh, why don't you just study here?"
Study here. Yeah. It's you're shut up, dude.
It's bad.
Yeah,
it's bad. So they're both barred from school, West and Dan. They sneak into the morgue at this point to test the reagent, because they're kind of forced to on a human subject. Finally,
creepy detail here.
Yeah.
Every time someone's going to the morgue, the security guard's like, "Okay, it's break time." And it's ew, dude.
Yeah.
Are they going in there to,
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, everything in this movie is tongue in cheek. So it's
He even says it all naughty, like.
Yeah, he's the character, huh? Every time
Yeah.
somebody shows up, he's got something fun to say.
Yeah.
Like the one part, he's like, "Oh, what do you got? My lunch in there?" I was
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, and he's like, it's just a meatball that a truck ran over. He's like, gross.
Yep. So they sneak in and they eject the corpse, right? And because they're desperate to salvage their medical careers here. And as soon as they inject it, the corpse comes back to life. But somewhat like the story, basically like the story, he's like this. It's like a frenzied, violent, like zombie-like state, right?
Yeah.
It's very much a zombie thing going on, right?
Funny little part there when they pull the body sheet off of Herbert West.
Yes,
he's got a toe tag on.
Yes.
And he just puts the sock over the toe tag. I was like, all right, weird little detail there.
Yep, there's a couple of those weird little deets.
Yeah, little deets. Yeah, there are some.
But just as the insanity is going, and this dude totally looks like Joe Piscopo from Sidekicks.
No, he looks like Joe Piscopo from Dead Heat. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
the cop movie where he brings it back from the dead, and he's like,
"There you go." Yeah. I made the connection. Yep, I made the connection. I just yep. So in the height of the insanity that's going here, because they're trying this thing, this dude's like attacking them, totally nude, by the way, with really, really terrible like body makeup. I guess there was an attempt at something going on.
Dude, the final scene, the body makeup is atrocious. Ugh.
Oh yeah. So during this insanity that's occurring, Dr. Halsey shows up, which is like, oh shit, and he's they're in the room, and like he hears the insanity going on, and the zombie that they just created knocks the door over, steps on him,
throws him against the wall,
like it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But he eventually gets killed by this reanimated corpse, unfortunately, and then West jumps on his back and has the bone saw, which he sticks in his back, but then comes out through the center of his chest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Physics doesn't apply in this one.
No, and you definitely can't see the seams from.
Suspend disbelief. Let's.
I'm trying. So, just like in the story, kind of. Similar. We'll say similar to the story. West is unfazed by all this violence and craziness going on, because there's the prospect of working with a freshly dead specimen. And West goes ahead and injects Dr. Halsey's body with his reanimating agent. Once again, Dr. Halsey, he returns to life, but also in a psychotic zombie-like state.
Yeah. Wild boy. He's wild.
Yeah, it's out of control. And of course, Megan shows up. Nearly hysterical, but you could tell that there's kind of like a recognition, because when she like sees her father, the father's like, oh, he kind of sees her a little bit. And so cut to
absolutely a cut to moment, please.
Cut to we Dr. Carl Hill, who we were discussing before, the creep,
is about to creep some more. He's about to creep some more.
Oh hell yeah. He takes care of Dr. Halsey, and he puts in this this like padded cell, which is like right next to his office. Why is that there?
I was thinking that later on in the scene that it gets to, but I was
he was going to throw Megan in there.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, this is where he throws the co-eds. This dude is like level 10 creep.
Like almost like he would have a file on like his obsessive like with like hair and napkins in it.
Yeah, it's odd. Yeah. But he goes ahead and, because I guess this is what you do. He carries out, an operation on him to give him a lobotomy.
Yeah, with his super sick laser drill.
It is sick. And then during the course of this operation, he discovers that Dr. Halsey, he's not sick, but he's dead and has been reanimated. And, this is where we get the fun twist, basically, where the story turns. Hill goes back to West's basement lab, and he wants to blackmail him for, to surrender the reagent to him so he can take the credit for all of West's work. So we get this little scene, Herbert West puts the reagent, he shows a microscope slide with the dead cat tissue. And then Dr. Hill peers through the microscope at the slide, and then West decapitates him with a shovel while saying, "Plagiarist!" And it's the camera angle when he puts the shovel through his neck. It's so like it's so
silly.
funny but silly, like
It's silly.
overly silly. And I know that's the point. I know.
But is that the point?
It is. I mean, it obviously is. So West then reanimates Dr. Hill's head and body separately.
Because what does he say? He goes, "I've never tried parts."
Yes. So
which
while
I said out loud, "Shut up!" Like Kevin McAllister to the furnace.
Yeah, shut up. So while West is questioning Dr. Hill's head and taking notes, Dr. Hill's body sneaks up behind him and knocks him out.
In the worst display ever, too.
Oh, yeah,
it's the guy with the big shoulder pads to cover the head, and he just goes like,
yes,
a little push.
The body carries the head back to Dr. Hill's office, gets the reagent and also the notes. So
then the fun begins.
And then the fun begins, right? So then we get to the next scene, and it's not really explained very well, which is kind of weird to me. Halsey has mind control over all these guys.
Was thinking the same thing. Which we can, I guess, get to later. But now he has mind control because he immediately injects himself with another large dose right into his head, which also coincides with that thing later. It was like, "I told you I had a theory," but so apparently more dosage gives mind control, and maybe that's why Hans Gruber's head blew up in the beginning.
Maybe I don't know, because maybe he was working on the thing. Maybe it was an earlier version of it, but it's certainly not. It's just there, you know what I mean? And it's like you could see why they were just like, oh, just people will get it. He's the guy that's a head that he carries around, so the head's got to have some powers, or you know what I mean? Yeah.
Coked up, or coke fueled era of 80s TV and movies. Right.
So he has mind control over Halsey, and Dr. Hill sends him out to kidnap his daughter Megan from Dan. So while being carried to the morgue by her reanimated father, Megan faints.
Yeah, like you would.
And then, like you would, almost conveniently to set up a very strange scene that everybody always talks about. Dr. Hill, when she gets there, straps her unconscious body to the table, strips her naked, and we get this. I mean, this is the scene of the movie, right? This is the one that everyone talks about. His head is first licking her with there's blood all over his tongue, and then we get the most famous scene. The body shoves the head between her legs, and just as like the height of the terror happens, we get the cut.
So also a couple things here. One, they make him breathing, right? The head's breathing, which is so stupid.
Right.
Two, they go back and forth between him going.
Yeah.
And then being like, ha ha ha, and then also being like, Herbert, or like when like he's in the bag, he's like, yes, it's Dr. Hill. Like,
well, I mean, he would have to kind of breathe.
Errors.
He'd have to pull breath into his throat to talk.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense.
This movie doesn't make any sense.
I know, but like the labored breath, and then they pour the blood into the pan.
Yeah,
like he's a rose, like the head's gonna sop up blood.
Yeah, I don't know.
The heart takes care of that. That's
it's just a lot
10
of
years
like,
of medical school for me for
so the height of the horror, Dan and West show up,
and the only part where he's actually cool is being Herbert West. The only moment where you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's the kind of guy where he's like kind of like over a tris with a co-ed.
Yeah. Get a body in a sideshow or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Get a box in a sideshow. Sorry, folks, I'm not the big devotee of this film that a lot of people.
Oh, really? I would have thought.
Yeah, right. So, and you're right. This is the part where they kind of like try to redeem West a little bit, because there's a scene coming up, and it's so West he distracts Dr. Hill. Dan frees Megan. Dr. Hill reveals that he's been reanimated and lobotomized several corpses from the morgue, rendering them susceptible to mind control. However, Megan gets through to her father. Once again, we kind of get that glimmer of it before. Fights off the other corpses long enough for Dan and Megan to escape.
A poor attempt at the Tomb Legion here.
Right. So then we have this chaos that ensues, right? All these reanimated corpses, they get up, they do their thing. We have the whole, it's kind of like exactly the Tomb Legions. We get West injecting Dr. Hill's body with a lethal overdose of the reagent, but Dr. Hill like mutates and his like intestines come out and it attacks West. We also get a little
tentacles.
They're intestine
tentacles.
Yeah. And it grabs them, but like right before it like does the full thing where it grabs them to pull them, we get a little shout out to the end of the actual story because you see a guy get ripped apart.
It's a poor attempt, like I said, at the Tomb Legions, where like that's supposed to be Herbert West, and so they go against Megan's dad, the dean, who
So the tentacles pull him into the body, and he tells him to save his work, and then he gets pulled in by those, you don't really see what happens to him. And there's a sequel to this movie, so I guess they, whatever. So you don't really get to see him get killed.
You just see a void light from, Hill's body.
Yep. So Dan goes ahead and retrieves the satchel containing West's reagent and notes. And then as Dan and Megan flee the morgue, there's one more zombie comes out and is like chokes Megan, and he chops the arm off, and it's still choking her, kind of. He pulls it off, and she's essentially dead. So Dan takes her to the hospital emergency room, tries to revive her, but she is unfortunately she's dead.
Yeah, he's doing CPR on her, and you're like, this guy's supposed to be a doctor, and he's not doing it to the rhythm of staying alive, which anyone that's taken the class,
that's what you do. I learned that at Spirit Halloween.
Exactly, and also, not only that, if you're not breaking the ribs, you ain't doing it right.
Right, exactly. So after it's shown that she's dead, of course, he pulls out West's reagent. Scene fades to black, and then you hear Megan scream, a strange scream, kind of letting us know.
The scream of the dead.
Yes, this exactly. And that's it. That's the end of the film.
Grace, just blessed with the end of the film. Mercifully, the film comes to an end.
Yeah.
A film, if you want to call it that.
If you will. So and that's the story. It's go ahead, your impressions, even though you have seen this before.
So
once you finish the movie,
so first off, it's an attempt to do body horror and mix gore with campy horror and comedy, but it never lets itself take itself even a little serious. Like, even the main actors, like even like Megan's trying to do stuff, but it's just like it's not landing because everything else around it. What's his name? Kane is just easily convinced. And now, compared to the story too, one of my biggest things is it never lets itself develop. Like, everything is rushed. Everything's pushed. Like, all right, we got to make this hour and 36-minute movie. Why not just focus
feature length?
Why not just like focus on one part of the story? You know what I mean? Like, focus on one area or maybe half of it. That way it's all cohesive, and you're not just like throwing stuff in there. Like, another thing is the waxy head of the Dr. Hill. Like he put the like the, what do you call it, the anatomy head that they would study that's like in his office.
Oh god, I forgot to mention that. He tapes the anatomical head to him.
And it's like it's trying to be, throw that over there, but a big misstep too of like the time and when the movie takes place, and just the whole thing didn't work for me. And like I don't want to say I'm being over critical here, because I'm kind of not. It's kind of just a bad movie.
I mean, not even that kind of is. It is, and I know that's definitely a quality. I definitely enjoy, some 80s cheese horror
like
movies.
Return of the Living Dead, like I like that a lot because I think it does it right with the comedy. Like, I'm even a fan of Evil Dead 2. Like, it's one of, like, I love that movie.
It's the problem for me is that, okay, you took this story and just did this thing to it. So if you're calling, and it says it right in the beginning, H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator, and this is very far from it. And I understand what they were trying to do. I mean, I would assume it's more of that thing like, all right, how are we going to get this movie made? Well, if we do a straight period piece, this is never going to get made, especially in the 80s. It was obviously, they're trying to do what they could. So, it was going to be, to the theaters, or it was going to be straight to VHS. But they, they injected they injected a lot of humor. I don't understand all the like the sexuality. I know why you would put it in there to give it that that oomph that they're needing to be like, oh, well, obviously, sex sells, but putting it in there is just, I don't know. It kind of just downgrades the whole thing. It's like all the time that you're spending on adding all this weird sexuality to it, and I know that's his thing. I mean, and that's basically his style at this point. If you look at Stuart Gordon's movies, that's what he does. And I gotta think that it's just he wants these movies to get made, so putting some of that in there is going to give him some kind of edge.
Yeah, it's a lot of those movies too. Back then, they were like, you gotta have the boob shot, you gotta have and it's like it puts meat in the seats. Yeah, puts meat in the seats if you get a hot girl nude. And I mean, but that is like once again, it's a fatal misstep of those kind of movies where you could have focused a little more else on, I don't know, a little bit more story development, maybe dropped the hot actress and got a little better actor or something. I don't know.
It's just I mean, yes, 100%, because we're looking at the story and we're comparing the original story to the film. It's not gonna, everything is truncated, right? I mean, this is a very small movie too. Everything just takes place in these few locations. It's very small. We don't get the amazing stuff of like even just you have the two like underground prize fighters, or them going off to war and really getting into the stuff.
Right. Well, let's just go through the chapters real quick.
Yeah.
Like we don't have to like read the whole thing, but you go, okay, from the dark.
Yep.
And you start off with just the explanation of what they're doing. They start stealing corpses together.
Yep.
And then they realize, that we got to start doing this on our own, because it's just not working. It's not fresh enough. We have to have hands on what kind of corpse it is. Which they in the movie they just did straight up with the he died right now. Let's get him.
Right, because they're only complicit for that one scene. You know what I mean? It's not them working together for years. It's just, we're getting kicked out of school. Let's show that this works so we can get back into school. Yeah. I mean, you're well beyond that. Once in the story, it doesn't even it's whatever.
Right. And the only two scenes of them like really working together is them fighting the cat and them sneaking into the morgue. Because even at the end scene when it's the tomb legions, like even that, they're not working together really. It's just like, I'll be a diversion. Here's my bag. Yeah. You skip that, and then you get to here's where they start bringing some of the other stuff in. Where here's where they added some of the From the Dark stuff. Them going and looking at the bodies to find the right one, being the one that had like a heart attack in the first chapter.
Yeah, they were like, they follow all the local death notices.
Right. In the movie, they're just looking at the toe tags. And like, this might be the one. This will be the one that we'll use. Yeah. So then we go to the plague demon. So this is when like the medical school refuses to allow him to access the cadavers. Right. Then his teacher Halsey succumbs to typhoid. So you have that, and as a final respect to his mentor at that point, he goes, all right, let me bring him back. He might, and when we were discussing the actual story, that's what I was saying, like this guy would get it. Maybe it'll work on him because this guy would have a better understanding and he would get this kind of thing. Maybe that'll work. Brain. Exactly. So doesn't work. Halsey goes on the killing spree. Yep. Doesn't people, and this is where they lock him in the padded room, right? Yep. That's where you get that in the story. That's right outside of Hill's office, which is once again really friggin' weird. Yep. One of the best chapters, my favorite, is 6 Shots by Moonlight. Yep. This would have been probably one of the best cinematic ones to play out. Because they're licensed doctors. They're both working together at a university. And they get a place near a local cemetery. Yep. So, they have access to all the bodies that are going in there. They could pick and choose at that point. Right. And they could have had in here, we could have had Harlem Smoke. That's what this movie was missing. Dude, Harlem Smoke was the man.
Yeah.
And yeah, this whole scene would be the scariest, and it wouldn't be putting a head between a severed head between a woman's legs.
Yeah.
But yeah, like at this point, yeah, dude, like. So they find they find the body, they inject it in the ground, right? And then they rebury it, and the little girl goes missing.
Yes.
What a cinematic turn that would have taken, right? Like,
yes, when it shows he shows up at the back door with the arm in his mouth,
right? And even before that, the mom dying and then the dad attacking them because, like, dude, and now you're showing, because here's what they failed to do with Herbert West in the movie, like as opposed to him just right away killing people and injecting them, like it was a buildup. It wasn't really a slow burn, but they're showing you how he would develop to like his obsession with and the new serum. It was always the same serum.
Yeah.
That they didn't go into like the working on it.
Yeah, there's none of that stuff with the with like the lizard DNA and stuff that they talk about later. None of that.
Right. Which makes it more interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
And then the boxer thing, him showing up covered in like moss and dirt, and he's kind of like a dog returning home kind of deal. Which is just fucking nuts. And then 6 shots by moonlight puts him down. That's all he can do.
Yeah. Yep.
Ugh.
No, it's the movie is very much like a truncation of this story. They took the parts that and just pared it down as much as they possibly could, and I understand why they did that, because they wanted to get the movie made, and I get it. But I can't fault them for that. I really can't. Sure. But when you look at this story and start to like and start to get into it and compare and contrast the two, it's maddening, because you really want to see the real version, an adaptation that's closer to Lovecraft's, because I think that also Stuart Gordon had heard that this is actually a comedic Lovecraft story, and we covered that when we were covering this. Yeah, there is black comedy in here for sure. Like, there is really dark comedic elements to this, but it's not. There's no laugh out louds. There's it's more.
It's not slapstick.
Like, no, it's like really high irony, really, which is comedic in its way. Yeah. And once again, I know they couldn't have got this movie made. It would have been huge. I mean, I think in the episode we even said like this would make a great 6-part or whatever Netflix series. Like it would be amazing. So, I see how it got made. I see why it is the way that it is. It's a product of the 80s. It just bugs me that so many people come to Lovecraft through this, and then they get the wrong idea. It's like, this is not even close. And it's like, I just hope that people come to this movie, see it, and then read the story and don't get like, wait, this is nothing like the movie. I don't like this. It's like, I hate that, because that happens a lot.
Well, but even if you go, like, if we just cover the last 3 chapters real quick, and like not the full thing, but like the Scream of the Dead, you get that horrible scream of the guy where this is where Herbert West finally just goes into killing a guy on the train, right? Or the train station. And
I mean, it's wait, the part with the salesman? No, that's in the beginning of the story.
Is that? That's in the Scream of the Dead when he brings them back. Yeah, no, it's fine.
Sorry,
Yeah, so in the Scream of the Dead, he brings back the salesman, and he's telling the unnamed narrator that he's fresh, blah blah blah, and he perfected the type of embalming fluid.
That's right.
And he was saying
when he comes to, he's like, "Get away from me!" Yeah,
you thumb. What is it? Towhead or whatever? Yeah, because he's blonde, and you told me that's what that means. But and you get that crazy scream of we talked about, like he's just coming back, and but that's the first time it's almost like they're talking now. It's not just injecting the head and it can talk. And that's a big misstep. And then you get the World War II World War I aspect of it. Yeah. So great. And that's where you get the decapitation with Major Moreland.
Clapham
Lee. Sorry, Clapham Lee. Yeah, and Clapham Lee, that's where the decapitation comes from, because he almost falls. Yeah. He falls and he almost and then he, once again injects him because it's fresh. It's not just like, oh, he's here, he died from this. Let's do it. Oh, slapdash, blah blah blah. And then the end of the Tomb Legion is the coolest, because it ends with them just at this house. Yeah. They're kind of chill now.
Yep, but the chickens have come home to roost.
Yes, they do. And you get the big box at the end. Before that, they're give us the corpse of Who was it they wanted? They wanted the body of the cannibal killer.
Oh, yeah.
Halsey. They wanted Halsey's body.
Yes.
Yeah, so they wanted Halsey's body in exchange for basically their lives or whatever. And then they leave the box, they take it in, and Herbert West is like, let's burn this thing because I know what's in this. I know what's in here.
Yeah.
And as soon as I start burning it, boom, they punch through the wall. And that's where you get that version of the end of Re-Animator where they're in the lab and they're all like, and, you know, we all know what happens there. They all just, you know, before they disappear, they disembowel Herbert West.
Yeah.
Claiming their victory. Yeah. And there's a waxy headed, you know, figure who's obviously his head was just burned. And it's just like, it's so much better. And they didn't, and once again, we know they had to make it had to be made in the 80s. They had to find a way to make it be made. But for me, it's just like,
budget.
Exactly. For me, it's just like, just don't make it at all. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's just, maybe I'm being a little, you know, hoity-toity about it, but it's just because it doesn't even come close to trying to be anything like that. It just, you know, it's like, God, what you guys could have done. And then, but on the same, you know, on the other side, like I said, I understand why, and they wanted to get this movie made, but yeah, why choose that story when it's not, and injecting all the stuff that just isn't there and just isn't in Lovecraft stories. Right.
And don't call it H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator. Call it Re-Animator based on the story of H.P. Lovecraft. Or
I get
the director's name's Re-Animator. You know?
Well, you can see why they did that. Just to get, you know, putting that above the thing gave it a little bit of, you know, credibility, and people who may have not been familiar with his stories per se, just maybe with his name, like, oh, okay. And I guarantee that was really probably what they were going for there, and why they used it in that way. So, you know, it's what it is. But, you know, now to get to the real critical phase. For what it is, it's really bad, and I gotta be honest. I mean, I know a lot of people love this film. People bring it up to me all the time. I mean, I make horror artwork for a living, and people ask me all the time, when are you doing Re-Animator? When are you doing Re-Animator? I'm like, never. I hate that movie, and I hate it because I do Lovecraft stuff most of the time because it's so silly. You know, it's just not my cup of tea. And I know people love it. I know it's like there's diehards, man. There are Re-Animator diehards out there, and hey, more power to them.
Because of Hans Gruber.
Right, because of Hans Gruber. But yeah, it's, you know, it's what it is. It exists in our culture. It's one of those horror movies that people bring up. They like to bring up a lot, and it starts the conversation. I mean, whenever I encounter someone that's seen it and they're like, "Oh, H.P. Lovecraft, you know this. Oh, it's you make stuff based off of that." I'm like, yes and no, and then we have the conversation. I'm like, and I try to tell people, I'm like, hey, do yourself a favor, read this story. It's a lot more in depth. It's a lot smarter. It's a lot, you know, the characters are developed. There's a whole thing that goes on. It's not just this wacky thing that happens essentially over a weekend. it's decades.
Like, you could see like they were pitching it to whatever studio guy, you know, and then and he's like, all right, so we want to do Herbert West Re-Animator. And you hear, let's just call it Re-Animator, just like Terminator, you know, or like Annihilator, or like Cop, RoboCop, you know, like,
it's like, cleaner. It's cleaner.
One word, dude. No, seriously, think about this. And rubs his teeth, you know. One word, just Re-Animator, you know, and you can see it in the marquee. It's in the marquee. It's in the big lights.
Yeah, man, I get it. And more power to him to try to pitch a movie back then and get it made. Amazing.
He's like, how many tits? Full bush? What do we got?
Hey, they added that because of that, because it sells. I mean, because if you take that stuff out of there, if you take the nudity out of there, and you take the scene of the head, you know, almost going down on Barbara Crampton, the movie has nothing to stand on. It's just a stupid, somewhat zombie movie with very terrible effects. Yeah. So that's why it's in there. So it exists. We have to deal with it.
Right.
And
the whole thing to me is silly Billy Gumdrops, my friend.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because Lovecraft's stories have been referred to as the unfilmable, because you know, hate to burst your bubble this early on, but there are not great adaptations. There's some coming up down the road. You know, we're gonna tackle them that are somewhat close or kind of preserve some of the flavor. But as far as big studio movies, not really.
Yeah, so I'm sure
it's tough.
All right, so question.
Yeah.
You reanimate H.P. Lovecraft, right?
Uh-huh.
You put him in a chair.
Yep.
Check this out.
Mm-hmm. Horrified.
Yeah. Do you think
he thought...
Go ahead. You first.
He thought Dracula and Frankenstein, the Universal monster films, were ridiculous. So, I don't think he would have had a good opinion.
And those are toned down, man.
Dracula, well, I don't want to get into this. Dracula is ridiculous. There's a bee in a coffin in that movie, so it's whatever. But he thought they were ridiculous. So do you
think he'd be like, put me back right now?
Yeah, I think he would.
Yeah.
I don't think he would smile fondly on this. And this is also a story that he years later thought was ridiculous. So fast forward all these years and say to him like, hey, your most famous film adaptation is Herbert West's Re-Animator. I don't think he'd be into it just on that level. He'd be like, wait, not At the Mountains of Madness? Not Colorado Space?
Yeah.
None of that?
He'd be like
no.
He'd be like Don Corleone, like, look what they did to my boy, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Look how they massacred my boy.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Colorado Space. I watched that film adaptation. We'll get to that. I didn't read the story
We will
yet.
get to that. Oh my God, Nicolas Cage, stop.
The whole movie was just... we'll get to it.
We will get to it.
Yeah. But yeah, this, once again, like me reading the story years after I saw the movie, it's a crying shame because like the story is just so good.
Yeah.
It's so layered. It's like, it just, and I know a lot of people might go, what do you mean layered? I'm like, well, because it goes time, like each goes through time and the story's built up. They don't go, they don't like overdo the relationship with the two. Like, the unnamed narrator isn't like fighting back. He's just going along because this is his superior in intellect and thought and like, it's not like that whole like, like, oh my God, I'm so scared. Oh, what are you doing? He's just like, nope, we're going to World War I.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah. Yep.
You're my gameful employment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he's like,
I mean, purely on the merits of all things Lovecraftian, because we're doing the stories, it's certainly a misfire. I mean, if I was doing it, and I'm not comparing myself to Stuart Gordon in any way, but if I was doing it, I would have chosen a smaller story with a monster, something that could have been done a lot simpler. I mean, Dagon would have been. That's still going to be huge.
I know. I'm joking. That's why I made.
It's just one of those things. I mean, they could have, I don't know. It's just I don't understand the choosing of this story.
The Cats of Ulthar, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Cats of Ulthar could have been. I mean, that's very simple. But and there's a lot of these that he could have done. But that's his personal taste. Maybe that's the one that he liked. He saw like, hey, this has cinematic potential. We could do this. I don't know.
He's like, look at Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah,
super popular.
Yeah, I think maybe he just looked at this. Oh, this is the one with this has Lovecraft zombies, and I think they just went with that. So,
yeah, Lovecraft zombies were way cooler than other zombies, though.
They are, and I like the part where what is it? Dean Halsey's character in the it's not even a Dean. It's Dr. Halsey in the story. Excuse me. Goes on that like a week-long rampage through the town.
Kills 12 people. Yeah.
Yeah, and.
They finally trap him. Then they start calling him. The town knows was the cannibal killer.
Yep.
And that's like a lore on its own, built into this one chapter.
Because people in that town, because the town of Arkham, which as we go forward, it's another little story that ties into the fabric of that town. Like, hey, remember back then when Grandma was telling that story about the cannibal? Oh, crazy! Oh my God! Yeah. So,
well, and there's one thing where they tried to shoehorn in. Remember when all the Tomb Legions wanted Dr. Halsey?
Yes.
They wanted him. So it's like, why are they all bonding?
Yes.
So like, oh, well, they had some kind of mind control. When in reality, it's like, well, what was it? Who knows? I guess the serum and them being all dead together, it made them bond. Like, who, but like...
In the story, it was almost something like he was kind of like alluding to something with the lizard DNA of some kind of like, they were becoming like almost one creature or something. And,
right.
And it was left in that very excellent, vaguely Lovecraftian mode of like, hey, I'm going to give you a little and I'm going to let you figure out the rest.
Yeah. Or not even just ponder on it, Yeah. It's a cool mystery.
Yeah, not overly explained. So
yeah,
that's what it is. But movie of the 80s, product of its time. It got made.
Yep.
It's what it is. And honestly, this was the first one we had to do.
Yeah.
So going forward, folks, Cyclopean Cinema is going to be a thing. We're going to pepper it in here and there after we complete a story, give it a little time to breathe. We'll do a little review of if there is a film adaptation. There's a few coming up. I've already assembled the list, and we'll be checking those out. So hope you dig this little break in format. Talking about some movies, loosening up a little bit. Sometimes Howard can get a little stuffy, but
hopefully we're past the stuffy Howard for me. As long as it's Lord Dunsany, I'm.
It's all bangers for the next. It's all killer. We got through
it's all bangers until winter, is what you're saying.
Basically, because and I also want to treat these episodes as little laid back episodes for us. We have to get involved in the nuts and bolts of all the stories in the main episodes where we're talking about the story. These ones we can unload a little bit, talk about the movie, have some fun. Maybe if you're listening with us, crack a beer, whatever you want to do.
That's what I like to do.
I know. Everybody knows, Ken.
Yeah.
But so that's what we're gonna be doing. So I'm excited to have some of these come in, and we're geared up for our next tale. We'll be recording again this weekend, actually, me and Ken. So we won't be waiting too long for the next episode. We'll be covering The Rats in the Walls, which Ken is about to read, from what I understand, and I can't wait. And then right after that, we have The Unnameable, which is a Randolph Carter story, and it's awesome.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, man. So thank you for joining us on our inaugural Cyclopean Cinema episode. So for this episode of Learning Lovecraft, I've been Jason McKittrick.
And I've been Ken James.
And we'll see you beyond the wall of sleep.